I'm Nick Linzy. I've been a soldier, a music producer, I even had a restaurant. But at the start of the COVID-19 lockdowns in 2020, I decided to leave the restaurant business and pursue a new challenge. College. Last summer, after completing an associate degree at my local community college, I transferred to the University of West Florida, but I needed to select a major for my bachelor's degree. Then I saw this. As an archaeology student at UWF, I would be scuba diving to excavate shipwrecks from 1559 and searching for the remains of one of the first colonial settlements in North America. Sign me up. Well, that was last summer, and I only have 1 year left till graduation. This summer, I'll get my chance to dive into Pensacola Bay to hopefully discover a piece of history lost hundreds of years ago. But first, I need to know more. Who was Don Tristan de Luna y Arellano? Who were the people that came to settle with him? And how did a small university like UWF develop such a prolific archaeology program? This year, I'll take you along with me to explore the history of archaeology at UWF, the story of Don Tristan de Luna, and what we've learned since discovering the remains of 3 of his ships and their 1559 settlement. The University of West Florida, located 9 miles north of downtown Pensacola and 16 miles from famous Pensacola Beach, opened to students in 1967. The university has grown much since then, increasing enrollment from 1,500 students in the fall of its first year to over 13,000 students in 2022. But I want to learn more about the history of archaeology at the university, so I got a job on the inside. In the basement of the John C. Pace Library, the UWF Archives, and West Florida History Center. Here, I have access to much of the university's history. Every day, in my time between filing manuscripts and helping local researchers, I thumb through university files and manuscript collections. In my search for answers, one name keeps coming up: Dr. Judith Bentz. Dr. Bentz began the archaeology program at UWF in 1980 with the help of a $2 million archaeology project funded by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Well, using a sports analogy, I'm a walk-on to the university. There was no job, there was no archaeology, there was no anthropology. I had a good job at the University of Alabama, but I wanted to spread my wings a bit. I was running a testing project on something called the Tennessee Tombigbee Waterway, which was a huge project that connected Mobile with and the Mobile River system, the Tombigbee and the Tensaw, with the Tennessee River. So when I knocked on the door here, I had a $2 million project. And it was what they call sole source, which means they weren't going to put it out for bid. And so they were interested, and I said, well, you know, I want you to understand that what I really would like to do is to start an anthropology and archaeology program. They said, yeah. And I want this building that we're in, Building 13, part of it. I need another building for the artifacts that will be pouring in from northern Mississippi.
The university agreed to all Dr. Bentz's requests, and when the funding came, the archaeology began.
So we didn't have a truck, we didn't have a trowel, we didn't have anything. Didn't have a camera, didn't have a desk. And so the Corps of Engineers was just fine with paying for the equipment necessary for me to do the excavation, the third phase of archaeology.
But the Tennessee Tombigbee project was only a springboard for the archaeology program.
Money gets spent, you know. You're supposed to do what your contract says, and you do it, and the money's gone. And so I finished the reports about 1982, and I thought, well, it's got to start looking around and seeing what's here. Long story short, I made a proposal to Gulf Power.
Dr. Bentz had a lead on a potential archaeological site.
And I rolled out the maps, and I said, you know, I think that there could be a colonial site there because people have collected there artifacts of the right period.
With a little funding and a green light to begin testing, Dr. Bentz and her students got to work.
Took my students down, I only had a few at the time, took my students down there and did some testing, and did it with, like I did on the 10 Tom, hand units as well as using a road grader to take off the topsoil and see what was below, and my gosh, there was everything.
Although the tests revealed lots of historic artifacts, further excavation would require more time. and funding. Dr. Benz returned to Gulf Power with her results and an offer.
And so I figured, well, what do they really need? And I made a pitch that gave them the white hat with the public to convince them they were doing a great thing for them. And they said, how much? And I said, $175,000. And they said, when can you start? And we just found wonderful things. And everywhere I turned in Pensacola, there was a good site.
Having learned how archaeology began at UWF, I decided to visit the Archaeology Institute to find out what makes Pensacola such a great place for archaeology. To store the artifacts being studied and to facilitate the archaeology being done in Pensacola, the Archaeology Institute was created. Since 1980, the Institute has been at the heart of research done by faculty and students.
Both in the 16th century and in the late 17th and 18th century era of the Presidios here in Pensacola, we were directly subject to New Spain or Mexico.
And downtown Pensacola started as a Spanish settlement in the 1740s. It had a Spanish fort on it. In 1763, the British came at the end of the, which war was that? French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War.
It's incredible to think that hundreds of years of history still rest beneath downtown Pensacola. But just beyond downtown Pensacola, archaeologists have found evidence of the earliest Spanish expedition to attempt to settle in what they called La Florida, the expedition of Don Tristan de Luna y Arellano. In 1559, Luna took 11 ships, 1,500 people, and cattle and supplies to support them for a year to Pensacola, then called Ochuse. 3 weeks after arrival, a catastrophic hurricane surprised the unprepared settlers, killing many and destroying most of their supplies and provisions when the nearby anchored ships were lost to the storm. The first evidence of the Luna expedition came in 1992, when state archaeologist Roger Smith came to Pensacola in search of the Luna shipwrecks.
He said, I'm looking for Luna. I said, what do you mean you're looking for Luna? He said, Judy, they think it's Pensacola Bay in 1559, and 6 of his ships were sunk. He said, they're somewhere in Pensacola Bay, and I'm going to find them. Very first site he tested was that ship, what they call the palm of the anchor. So the anchor as big as this rope.
In that moment, Roger Smith and the archaeologists from UWF began writing a new chapter in the history of the New World. Then in 2006, archaeologists discovered a second Luna shipwreck, but still no signs of the place where the settlers lived for 2 years. Then, in 2015, that all changed.
We'd been working on the shipwrecks for several decades, and we had a sense of where the colony had ended up, but we'd never really tied it down.
A local man and UWF alum discovered a piece of pottery while driving through the neighborhood of East Pensacola Heights.
And Dr. Worth looked at them and he said, absolutely, this had to be the Luna settlement.
The Luna site is literally the earliest multi-year European colony in all of continental North America. And so that's like amazing site just for the practice of archaeology, but it's historic.
Well, I think one of our biggest challenges on the Luna site is the fact that we're dealing with 400 years of history since Luna was there. So we know Luna was there, but there's also later components. So there's a British homestead out there. There's some second Spanish or, just prior to the American territorial period, homesteads out there.
So we now know that the site is somewhere in the vicinity of 31 acres. In toto, so it's a large site. It is the single largest 16th century Spanish archaeological site in the entirety of North America.
The more we work on the site, I think we're going to see more and more evidence of the fact that these people were in survival mode, and they were having to, large swaths of them, abandon the settlement and go interior at times. It seems like it's been a long time. We started in 2015. You guys have been working on this for 7 years. But we've also been doing 4 and 5 other things at the same time. And the faculty who do a lot of the research are also teaching full time. And so what it comes down to is 8 and 10 weeks in the summer. of intensive research.
And that's why I'm here. 8 to 10 weeks of intensive research in the summer. This summer, I'll dive into Pensacola Bay in search of artifacts that might reveal unknown details about the expedition. I'll dig down into the earth beneath Pensacola, hoping to detect any trace of the 1,500 settlers who once called this place home. What will I find? What new history will we reveal with what we've learned? We'll explore more on the next episode of Making History.